So these are the learning objectives for lesson 4. We're going to talk about how to develop the competencies and skills, talked about artifacts and how to use them, characteristics and core functions of empowered teams, explaining strategies and forms of communication for collaborating in a project team environment, learn the value of training, coaching, and mentoring for a team, explain the importance of conflict management, and discuss the causes and levels of conflict and their outcomes. So, crafting your leadership skills. Teams are made up of individuals with different skill sets, backgrounds, experiences, and attitudes. Cohesive, collaborative teams typically are productive and effective. Leadership is a trait that's required of everyone on the project team. So if you're the project manager or a team lead, then you're going to be looked towards for your leadership abilities. And as I mentioned earlier, this topic corresponds to the people domain of the ECO. And it's the power skills side of the PMI talent triangle. And so when you think about the triangle, power skills are going to be more like those soft skills. And they're the things that you don't necessarily think about when you're practicing for a test or studying or even thinking about a project that you're going to lead. A lot of times we rely really heavy on the project piece and the how to go about that. But the soft skills, of course, are the things that's able to get us over the finish line. So project professionals use interpersonal power skills, including collaborative leadership, communication, an innovative mindset for purpose orientation and empathy. Teams that have these skills can maintain influence with a variety of stakeholders, which is a critical component of making change, right? And so we all have heard very often that it's not necessarily who you know. I mean, it's not necessarily what you know, it's who you know, right? And it's the same thing. Sometimes your influence with a stakeholder can make the difference with you being able to get a project across the finish line when you otherwise may not be able to do so. So let's look at some of the essential power skills required to lead teams. General guidelines to develop your leadership competencies are listed here about how to tailor your leadership style to the project. You want to use emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills so that you can lead with empathy. And so emotional intelligence is a word that we hear quite often thrown around, but it's not necessarily expanded upon or defined. And so you just want to make sure that you're being mindful of individual and team aims and working relationships. And then cultural and diversity aspects are important elements to implementing effective leadership modes. And then look at more kinds of diversity, like differing motivations, working styles of individuals and groups, because that stuff can vary depending on how your team is made up, right? Depending on your team's experiences, their age, culture, job roles, and different types of things. Creating a strong team requires focusing on creating an environment that's psychologically safe so that team members feel empowered, takes transparency and fostering a sense of openness. And so communication and openness to learn from others builds trust and improves the optimal options to lead not just your team members, but also when you're working with stakeholders. And so if you think about this, first of all, this is just good information for all of us as leaders of the business, right? It's good information for those of us that are working in a leadership role or project management role. Taking a step further for how it maybe applies on the test is when you're given, because you know the test is going to be situational questions, right? And so when you're given certain situations on the exam and you're thinking through which is the best answer to choose, these are the things that you need to consider as you think through that answer, right? So we're going not just over this because it's to help you become a better project manager, but it's also so that when you're taking the exam, you know the right way the exam is looking for you to answer these questions. And so you really want to make sure that you're thinking through what's the best power skill to leverage, what's the best leadership style you should leverage based on the information that you're being given about the team at that time. As a project professional, you want to possess and apply leadership skills that enable a good working environment and guide your team toward accomplishing the desired result. So that requires a balance of ethical, interpersonal, and conceptual skills that help you analyze situations and interact appropriately. Project managers work and communicate with several different people throughout the life cycle of a project. So having strong people and leadership skills is crucial. Depending on the project professional's personality and a project's environment, the leadership style that's used can vary from a servant leadership style to a more direct approach. I would say that almost all of the time, if you're in an agile environment, on your exam, you're looking to be in a servant leadership role. If you're on a waterfall type project, then the situation may vary and it may require a slightly different approach. But just keep that in mind as you're going through the exam. Um, the performance of a project manager and the effectiveness of a leader are both measured in terms of the performance of the team, right? So when you have a strong leader leading the project, you will have a much higher performing team. So the skills you see here are skills and competencies that will be covered throughout this lesson. And like I said, it's more thinking about those soft skills. And, these are some things that may not be inherent to a person, right? As a leader or as a project manager, some of these may not be ingrained in you or your strengths. And so you do need to make a conscious effort to communicate effectively, to focus on conflict management, to critically think, and so on. So, active listening. Um, Active listening is a communication technique that involves acknowledging the speaker's message and the recipient, clarifying the message to confirm what was heard, that what was heard matches the message that the sender intended. I'm very guilty of thinking about how I'm going to respond to something while the person's still talking to me, right? That is not a good example of active listening. A good example of active listening is actually listening to the person and then giving them feedback about what you heard to ensure that you heard it correctly. And you cannot do that if your mind is already thinking about how you're going to respond or what you're going to say next. So that's an example of having to be intentional and me not pushing through and starting to move forward in my brain, but to slow it down and focus on the conversation that we're having. Because sometimes when you're not doing that, important information is missed. And as a project manager, that could be a very crucial part of information. And another definition that's here is the communication styles assessment, which is a technique to identify the preferred communication method, format, and content for stakeholders for plant communication activities. And so we know that not everybody likes to communicate in the same way. I lost my slide. We know that not everybody likes to communicate in the same way. And so it's important that you're communicating with people in the method that they prefer. Um, Emotional intelligence in general is part of the larger set of interpersonal and team skills that a project leader is expected to have. And so, um, influencing, motivation, nominal group technique, political awareness, transparency, We'll talk through some of those, but these are just different types of skills you want to make sure that you possess. So these are different types of leadership styles that we all probably see examples of today in our daily jobs and what we do. Um, the different types of leadership styles may switch up depending on the environment you're in. So you want to make sure that you know a few of these different types of styles and learn the differences between them. The most important part is going to be to have the ability to adapt and tailor your style to the situation. You'll need to think about not just your own experience, but you'll need to think about the team's experience, the organization's experience, with the type of project that they're working on. And so, like, is it a new project or is it a new type of way to approach how you guys are working on the project? Something else to factor in is like the team's maturity, right? So, like, experience levels, that team working together. Certainly, a team that is used to working together for many iterations can probably pivot faster, or may have a different type of synergy than a newly formed team that's still in the kind of getting to know each other stage. Different personality types, all these factors lead up to the appropriate style that you as a project manager would want to employ. Also, the governance structure of the organization influences the leadership style, right? And so that's part of the influence of the entire organizational culture. What's the precedent? What's the experience? What's the expectations within the organization that you're working? And then think about how your team is located, right? How can you enable them to work their very best under potentially challenging conditions? Um, on the exam, if you're given an option, excuse me, it's almost 100% if you can have people in person, face to face, that's going to always be the best situation on your exam when you're taking it. If you have a group and they may be remote, then you'll always want to think about how can you foster collaboration? How can you get everybody synced and aligned? What methods can you use when people work different time zones, or when people come from different backgrounds and cultures? When people are always remote and have never worked alone, like, what levers can you pull in order to increase that team's ability to work together and increase their overall performance? So some of the styles we have here are a direct approach. That's going to be with the project manager basically making all the decisions. Consultative, the leader factors in opinions, but ultimately makes the decisions. Servant leadership, the leader models desired behaviors. Consensus collaborative, the team operates autonomously. And situational, the style changes to fit the context and maturity experience of the team. So make sure you're familiar with these questions, with these styles, because it may just give you a situation that a team is in, and it may just ask you what's the leadership style that the project manager should employ. And you'd want to select based on the situation that you see there, what would be the right situation or leadership style. Leaders and managers are not the same thing. Um, Oftentimes you have to do both, but they're not the exact same thing. So leadership refers to guiding the team by using discussion and an exchange of ideas, where management is more about directing actions using a prescribed set of behaviors. Not all team members and not all stakeholders are motivated and inspired the same way. And so you need to recognize and act upon the most suitable and reasonable approach to lead the project team. Whether the approach is to take charge or quietly work behind the scenes, as the project manager, you've got to assess the situation and adapt your leadership style to that situation and the stakeholders. And so it can sometimes feel like you're juggling, 13 different people, personalities, priorities at the same time. You've got to be aware of the individual and the team needs, your working relationships, and you've got to use and leverage your emotional intelligence. So again, some of this may seem like, oh, I know the difference. I've been working in corporate America for X number of years. I understand the difference. But this is about making sure that you're aligned with what the PMI organization defines these terms as and how they recommend that the terms are applied. Servant leadership. We hear about it all the time, right? It's a leadership style used in agile and other types of projects that encourages the self definition, self discovery, and self awareness of team members by listening, coaching, and providing an environment that allows them to grow. So, servant leadership is going to be a key concept throughout um, the PMP exam. And honestly, as well as if you're working in a project manager role, you'd already know that, or if you're striving to be one. Servant leadership is key. It's basically taking the team and thinking through all of their needs and making sure that the development of the team members is there. And so as a project manager, it's less about managing projects and teams and more about trying to keep the project on plan, keeping the team in line. Servant leaders help teams develop and grow as a group and as individuals. Servant leaders facilitate the team's work by providing coaching and training. They remove blocks that may impede work progress, either from people or processes, and they focus on team accomplishments rather than team misfires. So, to help reflect this change, in many organizations use the term project leader than project manager. And I personally, like, I don't necessarily like to say, oh, I'm somebody's manager, right? I like to say I lead the team of so and so. It feels like a better term to me. Servant leadership means leading by supporting the team and addressing their needs. It aims to undertake the team's needs and take action to enable the team to perform and deliver. You want to support the team with a conducive environment and lead with communication by removing distractions or roadblocks. You're working for the team, therefore, you must focus on their needs. Being a servant leader requires skills such as active listening, coaching, awareness, and facilitation. So, if you see a situation going on the exam, the right answer may not be for you to go in and make a decision about something, right? And you may see that as an answer. Hey, step in and make the decision, get the team back on track. That may not be right based on the team, the makeup of the situation. It may be more for you to help the team make the decision, for you to get the team back on track, for you to remove whatever roadblocks they see, for you to facilitate them starting the conversation and giving the team the autonomy to make the decision, right? That's being a leader as well. And so making sure that you're identifying that, because you will see questions, many questions that will have two answers that both could be right, but you're always going to be looking for what's the best answer, not what's a answer, what's the best answer. And so based on that situation, if you should be employing a servant leadership style, then your goal will be to help facilitate, not dictate. Adapting a growth mindset. Here's a definition here. A growth mindset, as conceived by Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck and colleagues, is the belief that a person's capabilities and talents can be improved over time. So if you consider the status quo, you can open up new ideas and new perspectives. Challenging the way things were done or are being done in the present assures that everybody involved is utilizing the best approach and the best product. And it also breaks complacency and blind acceptance. Make sure that you are encouraging healthy skepticism on all aspects of the project and its vision. This will help stakeholders not overlook anything and not assume too much. You want to think about introspection, right? And the best approach. Um, you want to examine your own mental and emotional state and think about how you can adapt a growth mindset to a project to take it to the next level. So that means challenge things as they come up, right? Don't just say, oh, this is the way it should be, or this is how it's always been done. You want to make sure you're working to continuously improve and innovate. It's very important, and it's easy to become complacent and get stuck. Team building. I love this picture. Team building is crucial to ensuring that the team functions in a cohesive manner, making sure that everybody's working together in the same direction. It's crucial up to leading a successful team. Team building activities can unify, and so working collaboratively toward a shared goal is a great way for team members to help each other reach a higher level of performance. Team building activities um, or actions that you build in can help the team develop into a more mature, productive team. And these things can be formal or informal, they can be brief or extended. They can be facilitated by yourself or even a professional facilitator. So, can anybody share an example of a positive team building experience they've had that they remember? I'm
I
just
know
talking
in the
to
past,
myself.
I'll just offer in the past, I've been on teams where we would have a kind of getting to know you exercise at the beginning of the formation of the team, where we shared some information that was not work related, but it was more personal to kind of get to know our team members. And that was a really cool thing, especially when you're in a virtual environment and people are
Yeah.
not co-located.
I agree. I remember not too long ago I went to Dallas and we did a team building exercise. They have like a shuffleboard place there where it's like, I don't know what it's called, but you have like the above ground shuffleboard or whatever. Everybody gets to play and it's super competitive and you rotate stations and stuff and you get thrown in with people that you don't normally interact with. And so for me, that was super memorable because one, it was something I had never done before as far as the game we played. But then two, I had the opportunity to be kind of thrusted into a situation where I was forced to work together and encourage on people that I did not normally interact with. And so I definitely think that that strengthened the overall team dynamic by us doing something like that together. So you guys should have already talked about Tuckman's ladder, all of the different stages of a team when they come together, forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. Um, Forming is when team members meet and begin to trust one another. It's very early on. Storming is when the team members begin to assert themselves and take control of emerging issues. Norming is when the team begins to work productively without worrying about personal acceptance or control issues. Performing is when the team's at optimal productivity, they're collaborating easily, communicating freely, solving their own conflicts. Like this is utopia in the performing stage. In adjourning, team members complete their assignment, their assigned work, and they shift to the next project or task. And so, how do you fit in as the project leader? Well, during a project, teams can sometimes get stuck on a particular stage or even revert back to a earlier stage. It's especially likely after a disruption, such as new team member joins or leaving, or perhaps a change or shift in roles. And so you want to make sure that the team gets through the storming phase as quickly as possible so that norming is productivity, performing is the height of that productivity, and adjourning is like we're wrapping everything up, everything is ready to go. So you don't want to get stuck in storming. And you want to be able to identify if the team's reverting back so that you can help get everybody back to the norming stage. Balancing the team tone with a sense of urgency. And so when we talk about tone and urgency, it's important to provide an environment where your team members feel a sense of value and that they are empowered to contribute to the overall success of the project. So we talked earlier about ensuring that the team feels like it's a psychologically safe environment. So that's one where you want your team members to feel like you value them and that their contributions matter. But you got to balance that with helping the team cultivate and establish a sense of urgency because you really want them, and we may all feel this now, you want them to be able to provide their best work in the shortest period of time. And so if you think about how do you do it, it's balancing consistency and motivation and emphasizing that sense of shared understanding of the value and the project. So it's important that the team's not just working on the project, but they understand the value of the project to the organization and how that project helps your organization achieve its strategic vision. It helps the team feel more motivated that their work is making a direct and positive impact on an organization. So that includes leading through the communication of the project's importance and vision, showing your team why it matters, creating relevancy and reinforcement of the value. I know that personally speaking, working on teams, when someone shares to me how my little cog works into the bigger machine of the company, it definitely kind of dials me in a little bit more when I understand the importance and where my part fits into the bigger piece of the organization. And your project team's the same way. Virtual team member engagement. So, managing engagement with virtual team members requires persistence and a focus on good team dynamics, especially transparency, accountability, and active attention to effective communication. So, as I said earlier, teams communicate better face to face. And there's a lot of evidence of the criticality of being able to assess body language and tone of voice to ensure that team members have bought into the approaches they're using to solve problems. So you want to think about making sure that you're using and adapting video conferencing tools, that you're constantly checking for active participation and assessing for body language and tone with your virtual members, which means, you want to make them ensure that you have good camera time. If you see the images here, both screens show um, the person's on camera. So it's important that if you don't have a team that is co-located, that you're making sure you're doing a really good job of engaging your virtual team. And then you can use work status tools like Kanban style boards. I've seen different types of project management boards that you can have virtually so that all your team members feel like they're a part of the group, right? I was on a team recently where all my boss and all her direct reports were in Dallas, and I was the only one in Atlanta. And I never felt like I was left out because I felt like my boss and my team did a really good job of still including me as much as possible in all of the things that was going on in all the team meetings and things like that. And so that's important because you need the productivity from your virtual team members to be as strong as the same ones that you may have the ability to have co-located. Or if you have everybody virtual, then it's even more important. And this is important to you for the PMP test because you may see questions around how are you, you have a virtual team member that's not producing. And like, what are some ways that you can do it? Or you have a team that's all virtual and their performance may be up and down or inconsistent. And it'll give you options. It'll, what should you do to help improve it? Or what should be your next step? Things like that are going to be, so you want to think about what tools you should leverage or how you should best communicate or what things you can do to increase productivity. Virtual team best practices. You want to manage the risk of people feeling isolated. I just kind of mentioned that in my own personal story. I'm focused on shared commitments and team goals versus individual accomplishments, and instill a sense of shared commitment to the project. So think about your project management tools, right? Like making sure that you're creating a team charter. So everybody is aware of the shared commitment, everybody's responsibility. You want to make sure you're adopting behaviors to reinforce collaboration and promote visibility. Enable your teams to self-organize and be accountable for deliverables, right? So particularly you may have people on different time zones and they're in different locations. And so they need to have the autonomy to be able to get together on different times or what works for them without you having to always be there to make sure that the project is still progressing forward. You can use tools like shared calendars to plan meetings, coordinate feedback, and just overall improve visibility of goals and keep everybody aware activity status, like we talked about using shared project management tools together. So for this first lesson, these are the things that we covered. Leading a team, value servant leadership, determining the appropriate leadership style, distinguish various options to lead various team members and stakeholders, and how best to engage and support virtual teams, thinking about implementing options for virtual team member engagement. So I went through that a lot. It was a lot of talking. Um, are there any questions about anything that I covered in this topic or throughout these topics, I guess I should say? Anything about what I discussed, anything about maybe how it looks on the test, any terms or questions you have or you are not familiar with? Wow, just okay. Everybody's just ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to hand off to Brenda so that everybody isn't hearing me talk for the next 40 minutes. And then Brenda is going to go ahead and go through her part. I heard that you guys sometimes do a 5-minute break. I went through, I think, a little bit faster, but if you guys want to do a 5-minute break, we're more than welcome to do that. Or if you guys want to keep going, then that's fine as well. You guys let us know what you prefer.
Is the next
I say
section
keep
pretty
going.
long? Is it longer than this one or?
No, it's shorter than that one was.
Okay.
Just keep going.
I keep gonna say keep going.
Okay. Brenda, do you want to share or you want me to continue to share? Are you on mute, Brenda? Or did you just? Is Brenda there? Let me see. Did she drop? Oh, I don't see her. I wonder if she accidentally dropped.
She let you high and dry.
I'm good. She did. Okay. Well, I know you guys said you didn't want to go through the breaks, so I'm going to guess I'll keep going. Let me see if she messaged me. She didn't. Okay. All right. Let me check the chat room real quick. Oh, thank you for the reminder, Lindsay. I didn't see your note, but I'm glad we did start recording it anyway. Okay. I'm not 100% sure, so I'm gonna just go ahead and keep going since you guys asked, and then when Brenda joins, I'll hand it off to her. Okay, so creating a collaborative project team environment. We just discussed leading the people in your project. And so now we're going to talk about best practices for ensuring that the work can happen smoothly. We'll talk a little bit about creating a structure for physical and virtual working, including workspace management, product artifact and document creation, and configuration management. And if you guys see Brenda join back, just stop me and let me know.
I just joined back. I had a
Oh,
power surge or something, and everything. I just dropped everything.
it's
Just dropped off.
okay.
Okay.
No worries. So somebody said you had just left me out, but
No, I
it's
wouldn't do you
okay.
like that.
Hey, did you
Okay.
want me to continue to share, or do you want to go ahead and share your section?
If you can share, and that way, just I'll tell you when next slide. That would be great. I would appreciate it. Okay.
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 Yep.
Super. So, um, thank you all, and I'll be sharing creating a collaborative project team environment. So, Maria just talked about leading the people on your project, and now we're going to look at some best practices for making sure that the project work can happen and run smoothly. So, this includes creating a structure for the physical and virtual environment for your team, and that includes workspace management, project artifact and document creation, and configuration management. Okay, so where and how the team works. So the team environment and location of a project team are extremely important elements to leading and managing your projects. I'm sure you all know ideally it would be great if everybody on a project team could be co-located together, but in our world, that's just not possible, especially with a global corporation. Teams are located all over, not only the US, but globally as well. So we have to learn to manage and make everybody on the team, no matter where they're located, feel like they are part of the team. And like Maria mentioned, she was recently on a team where everybody was in Dallas except her. She was here in Atlanta, but she never felt disconnected. She always felt like she was a part of the team. And that's a part of the leader's responsibility to kind of create that environment of inclusivity for everybody. The team needs to be able to contribute everywhere and at any time. So whether you're working in a different time zone than your peers, you should be able to get to the information for your project at any time. Whether you work a 9 to 5 or whether you decide to work in the evenings or get up early, like often I have on projects, and work early mornings or late nights, you should be able to access the information associated with the project and at any time and anywhere you're located. Um, you want to set up the physical environment to support the whole team engagement, so they'll be engaged. And if the team feels involved and engaged, their interactions will be more meaningful. And I think we can all attest to that. If you feel like you're a part of the team, you're going to be more engaged and more inclined to give more and to be more effective and productive on the team. If we create an environment or allow an environment to exist where all the team members don't feel like they're a part, that will impact the the project. It won't run as smoothly. It may not even make certain milestones and deadlines because you don't have the engagement of the people. So this is a critical piece of setting up the how and where the team works. So uh, co-location, ideally, like I said, is the best of all scenarios, but that's not possible in our new environment. So you have to make best of what you can in the environment where people work virtually. Factor in environment and location to team performance. So consider time zones when you're scheduling meetings to make sure that it's conducive for everyone being available and no one's not working, 2 or 3 hours later than they normally do because of a team meeting. You want to try to pick that time that's going to work well for everyone. Foster meaningful interactions to support autonomy. So the team feels like they're empowered to share, to make suggestions, to identify issues and problems and not be afraid to bring those to the table and be transparent. And you want to foster respect and agreed upon team working hours and practices, and that's often called ground rules. And I know on many of the project teams that I worked on, we would early on establish some ground rules. Some involve meetings, like meetings start on time, so everyone should be there and be there to start the meeting on time. And uh, ground rules around communication, being honest, being transparent, uh, share problems and challenges. Don't be afraid to share with the team if there is a problem. And if there's a disagreement amongst the team, to handle that disagreement professionally. And also things like respect. Respect each individual and give each individual the respect of sharing, not talking over the person, and listening to their ideas, everyone's ideas, and listening actively and just supporting each other. So next slide, please. Agile space for hybrid teams. So co-locating all involved in a shared workspace fosters, like I said, a more informal and immediate collaboration and exchange of information. I know we have in the various work buildings, we have collaboration zones where they try to co-locate at least organizations in the same space. I live in the Atlanta area, and we have certain floors that our team work on. Now, right now, because as we all know, in most places, it's first come, first serve in terms of seating. So that makes it a little bit difficult for you to claim your space with your team. But next year, it's my understanding that once the dust settles on all the return to office, we will be have assigned seating so we can make best of trying to sit with our teams. Ensure private spaces for those who need to work in solitude. And I think all buildings have those mini conference rooms or huddle rooms, I think sometimes they call them, where if you want some private time or private space, you can go in the huddle room. Um, Even the passive information that is absorbed from the surroundings is important, such as ad hoc discussions like you're standing at the elevator or standing at the water cooler, side conversations, whiteboard drawings, and physical body language all have value in being an effective team player. Being immersed in the team physically and mentally improves the team's ability to work harder and faster and more collaboratively and in a more unified way. So you want to make sure that you are not only there physically for the team, but there mentally. I think, as Maria said, when you're communicating with your team members, active listening and addressing their challenges and being present when they need you to be present to assist with moving the project along. In Agile projects, meaningful interactions is a core tenet already. To encourage frequent, free-flowing interactions, the team structure and workspaces must be conducive. And it includes whether you're in a remote environment or whether you're in the office, it's important to foster that kind of environment with your team. Next slide, please. Work information systems. Use of project management information systems to conduct work and share information is very important. For example, Microsoft Project or similar tools are often used, and people often use sharing platforms, or it's critical that you use sharing platforms to maintain your project artifacts. And some of those platforms can be Microsoft SharePoint, or what we normally use now, Teams. We use the Teams environment, or you can use Google Drive. Can anybody share some of the tools that you use to keep artifacts so that they can be shared across the team? What other tools besides Teams are folks using?
We'll use
Anything else?
Planner or ServiceNow.
Any others?
SharePoint.
Okay.
Used to use
We use
Create.
Thrive in our org.
Okay, great. So there are several out there, and it really, depending on your team and the level of documentation that's required, you'll want to make sure you use a sharing platform that can be conducive and available to everyone wherever they are. Next slide, please. The importance of artifacts. So artifacts enable reconstruction of the history of the project and to benefit other projects. Project teams create and maintain many artifacts during the life of the project. So project artifacts are really like historical artifacts, and it's what we can use to help us with projects that we currently have. We can refer back to former artifacts that we use on previous artifacts, or they are stored and can be used for future projects. Your work will be largely creating and maintaining these key pieces of work. Any documentation, plan, or item that could be used to reconstruct the history of the project or product, especially where changes were made, should be maintained and archived once the project is complete. And I know there have been many times on project teams that I've served on where we need to refer back to a change to find out when did that change happen, and for various reasons, for changes to the development of software, or just a various and sundry reasons. So it's critical to have that documentation in place. Next slide, please. Okay, so here are some good practices for storage and distribution of artifacts. So store artifacts in an accessible location for users. Like I said, where everybody can access it. Use a storage and distribution system that matches the complexity of the project. So some projects that are small in nature, little small or very short projects, may not require the complexity in terms of storage that other projects require. Some projects may just require, sharing on a SharePoint, while others, use a cloud-based document storage system and retrieval system for larger projects, especially if team members are geographically distributed, so everybody can get access to it. Next slide, please. Standardizing your artifacts. What to include. A simple way to produce and control documents is what you want to make sure the team, the ground rules are set for the team. You want to have a standardized format and templates. Organizations often have templates and style sheets to standardize their communications. I've worked on projects where in that organization, the department that I worked in had standard templates for managing projects. And those templates could be minorly altered, but primarily they remained the same, and that is for consistency. So it made it very easy to move from one project to the next within that organization because all the documents, templates were the same. And that was a very helpful tool in the team being able to find information and move forward with the project. Use a structured process for reviewing and approving documents. There needs to be a process for approving the documents that go into the repository. Discuss and implement version control and security. So that's critical because documents oftentimes are updated by numerous people. So you'll need to a system that identifies who updated it, when it was updated, all those things to make the tracking of the update of the document user-friendly for the team. And of course, documents should be distributed in a timely manner. Next slide, please. Excuse me. Tailor artifacts. So these are some typical non-exclusive or prescriptive. But you can tailor artifacts to fit the needs of the particular project. Some organizations allow you to tailor the project tools, and some other organizations are kind of a stickler about whether those tools can be altered. Usually to some degree in some organizations, but some organizations can be a stickler about that. So some of the key documents and artifacts that are part of a project are the project management plan. Of course, that's critical to the whole project. The project charter, change requests, the scope baseline, schedule baseline, cost baseline, and subsidiary project management plans. Project management plans, we have product roadmaps, task boards, experiments, product backlog, and sprint backlog. That's terms associated with Agile. So the project manager and/or the team selects and adapts the appropriate artifact to use for their specific projects. So all these may not be used. And then tailoring them depending on the organization you're in or what your organization requirements are to meet your unique or specific need. Not every process, input, tool, or technique or output is required on every project. Like I said, we have some projects that are small, quick projects, short-term projects, and then we have those larger projects that last for several months or sometimes even years. These lists can be considered what's typical on a project, the list shown there, but not exclusive. Artifacts typical or predictive include project charters, change requests, and baselines. Those are standard on all projects. Next slide, please. Maintaining the artifact. So some projects use a configuration management system to track the project artifacts and monitor and control the changes. And there will be a configuration management plan if projects have a configuration management system. So the project management plan is a component of the configuration management plan. And it states how the project information and which particular items will be recorded and updated. The plan also facilitates consistency of the product, service, or result of the project and or operability. So, and the configuration management plan describes how the information about the items of the project and which of the items will be recorded. The system is how a project manager tracks the project artifacts and monitors and controls changes to them. Next slide, please. Version control, as I mentioned before, is very important. Each time a file is updated, give it a new version number. And those version numbers typically include a date and a timestamp and the name of the user who made the change. And this provides a digital paper trail of the document's history. Use version control for important artifacts such as subsidiary project management plans, the scope document, and other key documents. Applying version control is critical, like I said, to being able to go back and sometimes you think, oh, why do I need to do that? It's this extra step, but trust me and you that it is a very critical part of the process. So don't skip over it, because the very time you think you won't need to know when something happened, that is the very time it will come back and bite you. So just take the extra minute, the extra time to make sure that information is included. The version control is a part of your tracking. Next slide, please.
Did you want me to?
How often would you, really quickly, how often do you, would you recommend changing the version? Or is there like a certain standard that you would want to utilize when you want to change it or update, like when you want to do this?
I'll speak for in my experience. We typically start a new version if there's significant changes to the document. We start a new version, and that is typically the configuration management team manager sets those guidelines for us as a part of the team. That particular person who serves in that role. But I'll let Maria share her experience.
No, I agree. I don't think it's something that you organically would plan out how often you would do it. You would more set guidelines on when you would do it. And then when any of those situations or changes come up, depending on the impact, then that's when you would need to make updates. And then you just want to log all of the updates. Because I don't know if you've ever like shared a document with your team or something, and then you go in 3 days later and someone's winning because you gave everybody editing rights, and now it looks completely different and you have no idea what the original one kind of looked like, or you don't have a way to revert, things like that. So it's just whenever you make a change, you just want to make sure you're noting it and documenting it as a new version and who made the changes.
All right, next slide, please.
Thank you.
It.
So eco coverage, the manage, we covered these topics from the eco this lesson. We talked about managing project artifacts. So we want to determine the requirements, what, when, where, who for managing the project, and validate that the project information is kept up to date. Of course, version control. And like I mentioned, on some projects, there is a person who is dedicated to being the configuration management manager who sets those guidelines, and those guidelines in writing as to in terms of the format, the syntax for your version control, for your numbering system, your numbering scheme, the timing of when you do it. All that generally the guidelines are set by the team and or a particular person who has that role and responsibility on the team. I think that is the last slide for this section.
Yeah, so I would say, does anybody have any additional questions about the project artifacts or what I covered in the beginning, or just anything else that you can think of, because we are well ahead of schedule right now?
Let me just
No,
make a comment about being the team. As Maria said, this is one of her favorite courses to teach. But the project manager and or project leader really sets the tone. So that can make or break your team. So you want to be inclusive, you want to be transparent, you want to be open, and you want to be there as a leader And like in the agile environment, they refer to leaders often like a servant leader, but you have to tailor your style to whatever the team needs at that moment. So sometimes the team needs for you to be, you know, that servant leader. Sometimes that you need to be, you know, the one just to make the decision and move forward. So just be aware and cognizant of tuning into your team and your people. Anybody got any questions or comments? I want to share experience when you've managed a team that was maybe easy or one that was difficult to manage and how you did so. Well, I guess not. Maria?
I'm good, Brenda.
Oh, I think we have a question. Hold on. Let me let me turn down the music in the background. Hold on. Apologize for that. Let's see what the question is. I would like to know what helped each of you on taking the test. What helped you the best? Okay. Well, what helped me when I took it, and I took it several years ago, I went through a course very similar to this one. Um, this was before PMN existed. So I went through a course that my department, I worked on a big project team, and the company paid for me to go, me and several of the other team leads to go externally to take a course very similar to this one, and advised us that as soon as we finished the last class while it was fresh in our minds, to go ahead and take the exam. And don't say, well, I'm going to study a while, and then 2 or 3 months later, you take it and don't recall the information that you've learned. So I say, you know, study as you go along and be prepared to take that test as soon as you finish the program.
For me, I had a completely different experience. Um, I would, I did the exact opposite. I definitely didn't take it immediately. I think I finished I think I was in the same version that you guys are in now, where I finished right around um the holidays. And so for me, I needed additional practice beyond what I gained going through this course. And it was hard to do that during the holidays for me, just because life, you know. So I practiced a little bit, but not enough to make me feel um, confident. And I did not, and PMP does promote taking it with 45 days. And I think maybe Brenda's example of how she did it would be the reason why for me, I was not ready. It was a really big test. So I waited till after the new year, and then I'll peel back and then kind of almost rebuckled and dialed down and started practicing and studying more. And so I would say key for me would have been the Rita McKelly book, Mulcahy,
Mulcahy. Mulcahy.
McCahey book. That was much easier read for me than the other PMP reference book, the PMBOK was, which is what we had to read, and it didn't have any agile stuff in it at the time. And then David McLaughlin on YouTube saved my life. I loved him. I listened to him all the time. I got to the point where I would listen to him on faster, and then I'd be able to answer the questions. What I really liked about him was that he answered his questions and gave really good explanations. And so I got to the point, the more I listened to him, I could answer them before he could. And I would even get to the point where if I'm like cleaning my house, or if I'm driving, or if I'm on an airplane, because I was traveling a lot in the role that I was in, I just listened to his videos all the time. And they helped me substantially. And then the last thing for me was on the PMI website, they have something called study hall. You do, and I know I hate anybody to hear about paying money, right? Because I felt like I paid a lot to get into the class, honestly. But the study hall was like $50 for a quarter, and it was so good. One, it's put out by PMI. So the people who do the test is PMI, their study hall is by PMI. So I felt like it most closely aligned with what the practice questions on the test would be. In addition to many mini questions, they had 2 full-length exams on that website. So I was able to sit and go through 4 hours of taking what it would be like to sit in the test and take it. I did it in my house for the practices, of course, where I took the proctored test in real life. But that was very helpful for me to see like how my body will react and make sure I don't use the bathroom, like drink a lot of water, and how I needed to think through things. And so I cannot just say like really the reader book, David McLaughlin on YouTube, and PMI Study Hall was the trifecta for me. Like it got me through to the finish line. I took the test, passed the first time. I had an hour to spare when I took it. I didn't need the whole 4 hours, and I placed, above target in all 3 domains. So I was really ready for it when I did take it. But those were the 3 most helpful things for me.
I agree.
Would you
I
say,
did not mention this, but the Rita Mulcahy book is great. And I use that as well. So yes.
would you say that David, the one on YouTube, would you say that those questions are very similar to the PMI test? Or would you say that the PMI practice test would be very similar to what you take for the exam?
Both. The difference is for him is I'm better auditory as far as learning, right? And so the PMI study hall and a lot of websites will still, or you guys are probably using what is it, Exam Wizard or something. I mean, it breaks down reasoning, but I don't do well with just reading the reasons. And so for having him explain it, it sinks much better to me that he was explaining it. But I think his was definitely spot on. And the test is about a mindset, right? The test is not about memorization. Other than a couple of one-off math questions you'll have on there that, side note, I didn't even learn the formulas because I don't like math. I'm not good at it, and it was a waste of time for me. But it's about a mindset, right? And so what he was really good at was getting you in the right mindset of what a project manager would do, how they would think, what would they do next. And so he would call out things like, see, right here it says next, and he'd circle next and like underline it. Now, this could be here, but this isn't the best answer, where no website's going to do that for you, right? So it was just the extra detail he would give. But long story long, I think they were both on target for what the questions would look like. I'd say study hall, though, hands down, gave me as close as you could get, because it's the same organization putting the questions out. So yeah, that was my experience.
Good question. Any more questions or? Y'all are a quiet group.
All right. Well, I mean, I'll hang on for a couple more minutes. We're not going to hold you guys if we're done with the content, but if anybody has additional questions and they want to stay on, I'm more than happy to stay on and for next, couple of minutes if anybody else wants to hang back and ask any other questions. If not, have a great evening. Thank you so much for your time. And I think I come back as a co-instructor on Monday. I'm not sure who's teaching, but I'll be back as co-instructor for that one. Have a good evening.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great time tonight, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ew.
Hey, Maria. This is Karoon.